welcome everyone. It is so nice to have you here. And a big thank you to Rain for welcoming me in. Now, the world has seen a big shift over the last couple of years around in regards to talent in organizations, and how do we retain that? How do we even recruit for talent? But what's really important is how are we actually nurturing talent inside our organizations or teams. And it's such a fascinating space that we really need to spend some time and really look into how are we actually looking after our talent already inside our organizations, and what can we do to make it even better. Now, something that is really important to us at Speakers Institute Corporate is around this whole thing called nurturing rising talent. And how can we embed that as part of our culture and DNA from the bottom right through to the top? It doesn't matter where you sit inside an organization or a team, whether you're a new employee or you have been here for 40 years or you're the leader. How can you be constantly helping each other to nurture and your own talent and each other's talents as we go through? We all have special gifts and we all have unique talents that need to be empowered and inspired and given that space to be able to grow and learn. But for me, when I look back to nurturing rising talent, I go back to when I was actually really young. And a couple of instances for me what made me realize what was super important in environments started when I was at primary school. I grew up in New Zealand, for those who don't know, in a place called Taranaki, which is in the North Island, very rural area, lots of farms. I think my nearest neighbor was approximately 1 mile away, so a lot of time to think and be on your own. But we had a school there called Finity Road, and it doesn't exist anymore. It managed to get to 75 years before we had to shut the school down. And when I started there as a 5-year-old, there were 28 children from the ages of 5 to 12. And so you can imagine with one teacher how you had to balance the different learning needs of a 5-year-old compared to a 12-year-old. And so as part of the learning environment, we were actually taught as students and put in situations where we're constantly nurturing each other's talent and helping each other, whether it be up to the older children or down to those that may be younger. And it was a fascinating environment to be in, and it's something I really, really treasure as a human being and a leader. But the second instance was at the age of 12, I was asked to coach a representative field hockey team. So I was the captain of the A team. They asked me, the coaches brought me in because they could sense my ability to lead and coach, to come and support the B team. And like when I think back to my coaching, there was obviously people recognizing my talent and nurturing that at a young age. And it's been a really important factor in the way that I lead. How can I empower and create environments where people's talent has always been nurtured? And I suppose the third aspect was I grew up in an environment where both sides of mum and dad's family were coaches. My dad coached a lot of teams I was in. And even from a very young age, my dad used to ask me a lot, what could we do in this situation? How could we improve this training? What do you think about tactics? So my dad was guiding me and always nurturing in what talents I had to bring that through. So let's have a look at how you can bring this into your organization. So let's start off first. When we think about talent, and look, my background's a lot in high performance sport and then in leading teams and now working with a lot of companies around the world. When we look at someone and we look at, where their talent is at, we're always balancing between where are their weaknesses and their strengths. And so which one do we focus on? Do we focus on the strengths or do we focus on weaknesses? And as we go throughout today's session, feel free to take images of any of the slides. I'm going to take this one down now. Now, I know some people don't like weaknesses. Maybe it's the areas that we can grow in and learn from, but in essence, we've got things that we're really good at and things we're not so good at. Now, I know from sport point of view, we always looked at what were the strengths of people. And then how can we maximize that strength while also looking after weaknesses and how can we grow that? But I think what's important in this day and age, we have a lot of psychometric testing where we might do Myers-Briggs, or we have disc profiling. We even have Gallup strengths, which I'm a big fan of, if used in the right way. But what's important first, I think, and those really great leaders do this well, is they help people unpack what their strengths are. And not only unpack what their strengths are, but actually how are they able to make a strength out of that? What is it that makes that a strength for that person? So we need to unpack, and that is the real strength of great leadership and coaching and nurturing talent. Understand how someone does something well, then how can we apply that to other aspects of other skill sets that they're required to use, or areas they need to work on, or even their weaknesses. So if we think about strengths, we need to identify what is someone's strengths. Secondly, unpack it. So unpack what that strength is and how and why is it a strength for that person, what allows them to be strong at that. Then discover how can we apply that to other areas. So identify, unpack, and then apply to other skill sets or aspects. Now, if we look at weaknesses on the other hand, how can we identify what is important? So of those things we're not so strong at, or someone's not so strong at, what is important? Because we can try and work on lots of things, but that may just make us mediocre. So what are those things we need to work on? Then prioritize which ones we're going to work on, and then go to our strengths and think about how can we apply the skill sets of that person and how they're able to achieve that strength to then bring that into work on areas that could be weaknesses. All right, so identify what's important, then prioritize, then how can we use the process or the skills that allow someone to turn one of their talents into a strength, and then apply that to the area you want to work on. So that's all good. We've got strengths and weaknesses and kind of those areas we can work on. But what type of leaders are out there? Let's look at which leaders nurture. And this is kind of my feeling. It's not based on any facts or evidence, like research evidence. This is based on my observations. So to me, a poor leader will be unaware of employee talents. They just have employees, but they're not aware of what their true talent is. They just have a role and they're there to do it, but they don't know what their talents are. An average leader is aware of employee talents, but that's it. They just have awareness that they are talented at doing something. They might be talented at speaking. They might be talented at negotiations. They might be talented at sales, but they don't actually know much more than that. A good leader is someone that can identify the talent. They guide employees into roles that allow those strengths to shine. So it's not about knowing they have good talent, but it's actually ensuring they're in the right seats in the organization or right seats in the team. And then a great leader is someone that can nurture talent, unpack their strengths and how they do it, and empower them to apply it to other tasks and other skill sets. All right, so feel free to take a screenshot if you wish. This is my observations of what different leaders when it comes to nurturing talent. All right, so I'm just going to stop sharing. And that's all good, right? So we know where we're at. But when it comes to succession planning in organizations, so let's switch here a little bit and let's think about how can we nurture rising talent through an organization, and what type of skill sets can we apply to helping that talent grow, how empowering that talent. So if we look at succession planning, I like to look at a bit of a learning triad when it comes to succession planning. So let's have a look at this. So when it comes to succession planning, All right. When we think about employees at different stages throughout their journey into the organization. So let's look at a new employee. All right. So when it comes to new employee, how do we want to interact with them to help them grow in that organization? So the first thing we do is train them, right? We need to train them around their specific role, train them into specific skill sets. So there's a lot of show and tell training, so to speak. When it goes to a manager or a specialist in the organization, the way we adapt that learning environment is we start going more into coaching. So we ask a lot of questions. We get them to think about what are they doing? How can they grow? So a lot of leading questions to get the manager or the specialist in your organization, so whatever their area of specialty, to think about how they can improve and grow. So you want them to come to the realization themselves. Then when it comes to someone who's kind of reached the leadership level, I like to shift the learning. And this is like, when we look at this, don't think of it as pigeonholing that new employees only have training and managers and specialists only have coaching. This is more of a predominant area of helping that individual. We go into mentoring with leaders, right? So how can we show them how to do something that's brand new in a new sphere when it comes to leading teams? And I really like mentoring. So mentoring is more about, here, come with me and I'll show you the way. So training is show and tell. Coaching is asking questions to allow them to come to the realization. Then mentoring is, here, come with me. I'm going to guide you and show you the way. This is when you go into more of the Mr. Miyagi looking after Karate Kid, or Gandalf in, oh golly, just forgotten the words, going out of the top of my head. Not The Hobbit, in The Lord of the Rings. Is that correct? Have I got the right one? Yes. Oh, good. I got some head nods. There we go. I got some people helping out with Lord of the Rings. Okay, so here is a model that you can kind of think about in succession planning. Now, if you look at this, the managers and specialists train the new employees. The leaders coach the managers and specialists, and then either a CEO or an external coach or mentor would be mentoring the leaders. Okay, so see how we are now creating an ecosystem of learning. The managers and specialists train the new employees. The leaders coach the managers and specialists, and either the CEO or an executive or someone external mentors the leaders into a specific area. All right, take a screenshot of that if you wish. If you have any questions, pop them in the chat too. Happy to dive into those. Now we're going to have a look at an ecosystem versus an ecosystem. So to create a culture of nurturing rising talent, it requires us to shift from an ecosystem where people are so focused about themselves and how they're progressing and what they're doing and why their thing is most important, to more of an ecosystem where everyone collectively works together and the whole is greater than the sum. So when we think about ego, it's individualistic and people are just trying to get their work done and focus on going up the career pathway and just want to focus on themselves a lot more. Whereas the ecosystem is that constant learning environment where we're helping and nurturing each other. All right, so when we look at this in three areas. One, we need to embrace it. So as leaders, and you're all leaders here, we first need to embrace that learning culture, and that nurturing of rising talent. So not only do we need to be proactive in how can we help people, how can we give positive reinforcement, how can we give them opportunities to grow, but also be open to that themselves. So we need to ensure that we behave in a way that we create a space where people can actually provide feedback to ourselves, and we take that on board and grow as well. We actually invite the feedback on a daily or regular basis. The second one is we need to really role model and be really human-centric around this, so that we're constantly thinking about how can, we're walking, talking, learning people, and we need to be able to showcase that. And I'm sure for many of you on this call, you're already in that space of embracing, embodying. But then we need to go to an empowerment sort of stage and think about, for everyone in the organization or anyone in a team environment, that onboarding is ongoing. So you're constantly helping people go into that next level of where they are in a team, whether it's a different role, how can they grow in their role, how can they grow as human beings, into how can they move through the organization. So onboarding is not just the first couple of weeks or months of coming into an environment. How can we keep that ongoing? But another part of empowering it is really about holding up a mirror. So I'm just going to go out of this now. Okay. Oops, sorry, wrong button. There we go. All right. So a really important part of now looking at how we empower it is how we create an environment where feedback is not just the 6-month or the 12-month review, right? So we've seen lots of those. They happen. I'm sure many organizations still have them. And you know what? There is a place for them. But it must not be the only mechanism of feedback. If it is, we're in trouble. Because if you think about it, a 12-month review is reflecting back on the past 12 months. Now, we could be focusing on something that happened 12 months ago. Now, in the meantime, someone's grown already. So is it worth actually even talking about that or bringing that up? How can we focus on what is happening now and what can we do in the future? But we need something that is happening in those 12 months before we get to that 12-month review or a 6-month review. And we need to ensure that we're creating a space where the learning is happening on a day-to-day basis. So how can we give feedback in an effective manner on a daily basis? So rather than, say, being in a meeting or being in a presentation or saying hello to someone, but and in that instance, we just kind of are there. Obviously, there might be some actions. We follow actions. We might ask some questions, but then we just walk out and move on to the next thing. But we haven't actually shared with that person what they did well and what could they improve. Like, great opportunity every time. And so this is something we have in Speakers Institute Corporate, in our entire way we work every single day. Every single program, we are giving feedback in real time. And so every day we're able to grow. Every part of a program we're able to grow. Every interaction with staff we're able to grow. And it's working always throughout the system. And as I mentioned, doesn't matter if you're a leader. It doesn't matter if you are 65 years old and have 45 years of experience. You need to be open for feedback and constantly thinking, how can you grow? Because we're never, ever at that point of knowing everything and being good at everything. But one of the challenges we face in life is that there's a lot of cheerleaders in this world. All right. And we've all done it. And I'm sure you've all done it as well. But cheerleaders are someone that'll go, hey, that was awesome. Well done. That was really good. And kind of cheering them on. But it's only a short-term hit. It boosts the dopamine, it boosts the serotonin, the happy hormone levels, just for a small instance. But it doesn't achieve anything long-term. It doesn't achieve anything. And so we have to actually look around, what is positive feedback and how do we implement it effectively? So what's so important in this is that you've got to shift away from cheerleading to actually positive reinforcement. So here's an example. So rather, and I've got Chloe, she's on camera, so I'm going to use Chloe here, and she's got a beautiful smile there. So if I said to Chloe after a meeting, great, that was awesome, well done today, that's cheerleading. Chloe doesn't know what she did well. She also doesn't know what she didn't do well. She just thinks everything was good, but I don't really know what was that good. So she just keeps doing what she's already been done. However, if I go to Chloe, I really love the way that you addressed people as they walked into the room. You connected with them from your heart. You greeted them with eye-to-eye contact. That was awesome. I really like that. I love you to keep doing that. So what you've done now is I've now shared with Chloe exactly what she did well. So that's positive reinforcement. Now, what that does is it gets her to focus on positive actions and behaviors. And it actually she now stops her from doing a number of negative actions or behaviors. Okay, because they stop doing them, because now you're moving in a direction of, oh, I know what is important and what's positive. So you go that direction. You start to discard them already. There's clarity on what is appropriate and what isn't. So the boundaries have now been created for her to really shine in that positive aspect. Okay, so that it's done in a way that is reinforcing positive behaviors and actions, which is super important. So shift from cheerleading to positive reinforcement. Now, who here has heard of the feedback sandwich? I want you to pop it in the chat. Who has heard of the feedback sandwich? Pop it in the chat. For the high achievers, you can explain it in one sentence for us. All right, so we've got a few yeses. Can anyone explain it in one sentence? What are the components of a feedback sandwich? All right, so good, bad, good. Yep, we layer it. So the pieces of bread on the top and the bottom of the feedback sandwich are good at the bottom, and then the bad or the things they need to work on are in the middle, right? It's the opportunity lies in the middle. I'm going to tell you now that the feedback sandwich is fundamentally flawed and does not serve you or the person you're sharing the feedback with. All right, and I'm going to explain why. Fundamentally flawed. If we go positive and positive with a negative in between, people are only going to remember the positives. All right, they remember the first thing and the last thing. The negative thing kind of disappears into the world and they think they're doing a really good job. All right, so that's where the challenge comes into place. And we know that people grow through a little bit of uncomfortableness and an opportunity. So what we need to do is shift it to what we call an open sandwich with a very thin slice at the bottom. And your very thin slice is your positive reinforcement. Because if we spend too much time on positive, people automatically, their brains, and there's research on this, that we tend to focus on the positive. Now, a lot of people thought it was around the negative. There's more research to say we actually attach to the positive if there is too much evidence of positive. So the positive reinforcement needs to be around 20%. Then the 80% above that needs to be opportunities to grow. All right, so just share a quick slide here. So our feedback here needs to be in this sense. And if I was actually doing this right, I would have made the positive reinforcement circle a little smaller. So 20% of positive reinforcement and 80% of opportunities to grow. Now, how do we do this in an effective manner? A lot of the time when we go to share areas for people to work on or weaknesses, we either go into a state of we go too hard and we hit them too hard and it actually ruins the relationship. So when we give feedback, we always must have the intention of maintaining the relationship. So we either go in too hard or we get too nervous on delivering that news and we come across uncertain, which also ruins the relationship. So if you're uncertain or you go too strong, you ruin the relationship when it comes to opportunities to grow or that negative constructive feedback. So how do we do that? We need to shift from a personal attack to more of an observation approach to areas to work on. So in most cases, people to shy around the edges. But what we need to do is hold up a mirror for people when it comes to opportunities. But if we go, you did this. So if I went to Rain, you spoke badly. You didn't put out the trash. You are the reason why we've got these bad numbers. Now that's a personal attack because I've made it you. If I went instead, my observation is, Rain, that you didn't put out the trash, but would like to see you do that in the future. Or it is, I'm feeling that you haven't quite mastered this yet. Or I have noticed that there is a 20% drop in your performance. So using those words of, I have noticed, I have found, this is my recommendation, this is what I observed, versus you now becomes a positive, constructive way of sharing feedback that allows people to grow through the opportunities. Okay, so excellent. There's an interesting message, and just before I go here. All right, so there's a couple of things as we wrap up, but I do want to have a quick look at this from Rahul. My experience, I learned people understand sandwich technique, and when we start with positive reinforcement, then they have their ear opened, what coming next, so they don't much bother about the positive. Okay, but if you create a culture of this is how we share feedback through the organization, then they're aware of what's going to happen. So we need to set the tone and create the environment. And if you can do it in a way where you kind of set it around that 20% positive reinforcement, 80% opportunities to grow, and you're open and you invite them to share with you in any opportunity, then you will start to see this nurture throughout the organization, and people will be waiting to, they will go, yep, that's great, positive, but now I want to know how to learn. So it creates that learning environment. All right, so that was a quick snapshot today of how we can nurture rising talent in an organization. Probably left a few questions in there, which is great, and feel free to share them with us and we can come back to you later. This is part of some of the programs that we deliver in regards to organizational design and leadership inside Speakers Institute Corporate. It's been a pleasure having you here today. I'm going to hand back to Rain, who's going to close off this session, but be an inspiring great leader who nurtures rising talent.